Ready to soundtrack your summer? With Red Bull Summer All Day Play, you choose a playlist that fits your summer vibe the best. Are you a festival fanatic, a deep end DJ, a road dog, or a trail mixer? Just add a song to your chosen playlist and put your summer on track. Red Bull Summer All Day Play. Red Bull gives you wings. Visit redbull.com/brightsummer ahead to learn more. See you this summer.
Hello and welcome to Haway The Podcast. It's Martin here. And with it being May the 5th, we thought we'd do something special for the 53rd anniversary of our FA Cup win. For those of you familiar with our On This Week podcasts, you will know Kelvin is a brilliant storyteller. So sit back and enjoy his story about the 5th of May, 1973.
1973 lives long in the memory. I was speaking to a young fan the other day about this, and it's funny sometimes when you speak. When I say young, he's about 16, and his what he said to us was, "Oh, I'm sick of hearing about that, man. Shut up." and I thought, I've never spoken to you about it before, so sit your ass down there and let it. You'll sit there and you'll listen to your grandfather. No, what a fantastic year that was. What a fantastic season. What a marvellous occasion. Speaking about that, I watched the final on TV, having been to every single round, every replay. I couldn't get a ticket for the final.
There's a song about that, isn't there?
There is a song about that really, I think over the years I've realised there's about 100,000 of us had been to every replay and didn't get a ticket for the final. But where do you want to start with that? Some fantastic memories.
Well, look, I think the interesting, one of the interesting things about that is obviously Bob Sokol came in I think the November of the season, and things seem to have changed quite dramatically, pretty immediately, really. And we saw in 1992 when we got the FA Cup final, also on this week in history, that the cup dominated and the league form really fell off, and we were actually pretty lucky to stay up that season in 92. But in 73, the cup run seemed to kind of have the momentum and help the league form as well. So, when Bob Sokol came in, can you remember what you thought about that? Because an ex-long-standing Newcastle captain coming in.
Absolutely underwhelmed, because we'd heard that Revy had been interviewed, and I believe he was. We'd heard that Brian Clough had been interviewed, and there was a lot of excitement about Cloughie. People were very excited at the idea of Clough coming in to manage with. And then it was announced that Stokoe was the manager, and he didn't even come straight away. I don't know if you know that. He was at Blackpool, and I think they were in the quarter-final of the League Cup. And he said, "Oh, I'm not coming until until Blackpool's played the quarter-finals." So, and he was there was a lot of crack about him being a Newcastle lad. But I don't know if you know this. His dad was a Sunderland fan, and Sunderland were his first sort of football love. I don't think he spoke about that much, but I've definitely seen stuff where he has acknowledged that.
Yeah, I think I did a piece on the site about the semi-final a few years ago, and I dug up something that Stokoe had said that as a lad, his first football experience was going to Roker Park, and his dad taking him to Roker Park, and he grew up in a Sunderland household.
Was Milburn the same?
Yeah,
didn't he? I think he had a similar.
He did.
You know that Jackie Milburn, he really encouraged Bobby and Jackie to go and sign for Sunderland, because at the time
the uncle,
I had this reputation. He was. And at the time, we had this reputation of being a club that would bring young players on. And he really felt that they would have been better off going there than going to Newcastle. I think that was his response to Bobby, especially, I think, was courted by Newcastle, and he recommended that he should go to Sunderland. As it was, of course, he ended up at Man United. But when you're saying Stokoe's impact, I mean, in terms of a character, he seems to have been, to a degree, chalk and cheese with Alan Brown. You know, he seemed to have a kind of relaxed kind of way with the players. You know, he gave them the head a bit. He wasn't soft, but he didn't. He didn't. I always sort of when I think of him, he was a guy who managed. He didn't feel like he had to have every base covered, whereas Brown, you know, it was every base and some. You know, he seemed to be hyper organised. Alan Brown. But you can't get away from the fact that you look at that team that walked out onto the pitch at Wembley, and I mean, 9 of those players were Alan Brown's players. Either came through the youth system or he bought, you know, in his time. What Stokoe did, I think, was he took the shackles off them to a degree. If you were watching Sunderland prior to Stokoe's arrival at the club, most of the time you'd feel that the team was playing well within themselves. You know, you could see we had some good players, but there was just something that was never that never quite worked. That was never quite right, and Stokoe just seemed to, you know, he was the catalyst, the trigger for those lads finding their feet and moving on. But the change didn't happen straight away, you know. I mean, we were in a relegation fight for most of that, for the best part of that season. And that was one of the things that, as a young lad, I mean, I'd be 14, 15 at the time, and honestly, I thought my head was going to spin round 3 times and fly off. I didn't know whether we were, you know, we're going to win the cup or we're going to get relegated. So, do you know which was it that was going to happen? We were 19th going into that Notts County away tie in January, 19th, and we'd had a break for, there was a flu epidemic, and that 2-week break, I think it was, with the league, it just allowed Stokoe a little bit of time to take stock. And I think that was, if I remember that rightly, that was when he brought in Ron Guthrie and David Young. Brought them in from Newcastle in that period. Much to my disappointment at the time, I always liked the young players. I used to get taken to the youth matches, and Keith Coleman was at the club. He'd been a good young player. I think he was captain of the youth team, and I always liked him. Joe Bolton was just starting to hit his straps, you know, and I really, really liked him. He was even as a laddie, he was a thunderous player. And he was a great attacking fullback with the youth team, but he could put a tackle in. They sometimes played him in midfield as well. So there was these youngsters, but Stokoe obviously decided he wanted a bit of experience at the back and brought in these 2 lads. Guthrie never let anybody down. He was one solid citizen, and I tell you, he was a canny attacking fullback. If you watch that final, you know, and if you just track Ron Guthrie's offensive work, he does quite a bit of work offensively in that game. Deceptive he was. He was a deceptive attacking fullback. But we were in trouble. We were looking like a team that was going to go down. Stokoe, it took him a while to get his best team, to get the team to play the way he wanted them to. even going into the fantastic Man City away game, we were still in relegation trouble until after the after the Man City at home tie, that replay. I remember coming out of that game thinking, my God, we're going to do this. Something, you really felt that night something was going to happen, something extra special was going to happen.
Yeah.
And relegation was no longer on there. I felt like we were going to finish mid-table, we were going to be safe. All the while, Stokoe played his strongest possible team in every game.
I did a piece on the appointment for the On This Day piece on the thing, and I went back in the archives and the newspapers, and the newspapers had us linked with Billy Bingham, Len Ashurst, Tommy Docherty,
Correct.
Dave Mackay, Charlie Hurley, Jack Charlton, Brian Doyle, Harry Potts, Jimmy Hagan, Len Shackleton, and some shy fella at Derby County called Brian Clough. So those are the people we were linked with at the time. Massive names in there. But the other thing, I mean, you touched on it there, that, in this running, Kelvin, March. I mean, you look at March, we played 8 games in March, I think it was, which was absolutely ridiculous if you think about it. But then you look at April, we played 9 games, and I think we had 8 league games in 20 days before the cup final.
Yeah.
And then there was
Correct.
a sequence, in that 8 games, there was a run of 3 games in 4 days. We went to Hull City on Saturday the 21st and we won 2-0. Then we went back to Roker to play Cardiff on Monday the 23rd and won 2-1. And then we finished it with a trip to Nottingham Forest the very next day on the Tuesday 24th and lost 1-0. And I was looking at that side, and you were saying that he played his strongest side. That game against Nottingham Forest, he virtually his strongest side, but he put John Tones in, David Young, Mick McGivern, John Lathan, and Brian Chambers were in that one. And then in the next game against Blackpool, which was the last home game before the cup final, but we had Orient a couple of days later, he played his cup final side, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah. And you'd say, was that the plan? I believe for that Forest game, that there were players they weren't necessarily injured, but carrying a knock or two, and that's why those lads got in. Mick McGivern never used to let anybody down when he came in. I always felt a little bit sorry for him. I always thought he was a very, very solid citizen, and that there wasn't room for him in that Wembley 12. I always felt he was probably, because he had a bit of versatility and goals. He could pop up with goals, McGivern. So he was a lad that never let anybody down. But yes, that Forest game, he rested. I don't think Dave Watson played that game. Am I right? I haven't got that. I cannot remember all the players that didn't play that day, but Dave Watson.
Dave Watson wasn't in there. Vic Allen wasn't in there. Ian Portfield wasn't in there. Yeah, he rested quite a few. But I mean, you look at that schedule in March and April, and it wouldn't be allowed now in the modern day.
Yeah. And as supporters, never mind the players, as supporters, I remember as I said to you, I thought my head was going to spin round 3 times and come off. There was no rest. You were you were moving from one game to the next game to the next game. It was fantastic. It was it was all part of the momentum that built up. We got no rest from it, but it was great. Especially when you're playing well and winning.
So, Kelvin, you said before you'd been to every match in the cup run, didn't get a ticket for the cup final. If people haven't read your series on the FA Cup run, which I think you did for the 50th anniversary, didn't you? I recommend you go and dig those out and find them because they are brilliant tales. But taking you back to the 5th of May, where were you watching the game? And tell us about that.
Get your hankies out. I woke up that morning, the Saturday morning, and the first thing I did was remembering that I'm 14 years old, the first thing I did was looked under my pillow, just in case Mum and Dad had managed to get us a ticket. And I was going, and oh man, I broke my heart. No ticket there. And I actually went out. I couldn't. My mother was putting a party on. The next door neighbours had invited us through to watch it on their new colour television. And my little brother, who's my youngest brother, who he's as fanatical about Sunderland as I am. He was flying around 5 years old with his scarf on. I taught him a few songs, including the Bobby Kerr song, which he would never get a row off me mother for singing it. But it used to be funny when he would just sort of run through the house shouting the Bobby Kerr song, and my mother shouting after him, But no, I had to go out, and I was nervous. I was coping with disappointment and nerves, and I'd been to every game, and it was a horrible, selfish thing. I didn't want to spend it with my family. I didn't want to have a party and and be me mum joining in with the songs and all that, and all that. I just didn't want to do that. I'd been on this journey, this fantastic journey, and these weren't the people that I'd done it with. So I was in a right stop with myself. I wasn't happy at all, but I came back, and my dad, me, and my youngest brother Paul went in next to our neighbours to watch it on the colour television. It's probably worth saying. My dad was at the point of going completely blind. And he was a Newcastle fan as a boy. He used to, when Stoke first got the job, he used to tease me and say, "Aye, it'll take a Newcastle lad to sort your team out," but he totally jumped on board with the journey, and was really excited about it. But he came from an era where people that there wasn't the animosity between Newcastle and Sunderland fans the way that is now. He came from an era where there were a whole batch of people that went to both St James's Park and Newcastle, and he was quite happy for me to go to both. I was taken to Newcastle first, and then Sunderland a little bit later on. And my first trip to Sunderland, I knew I was going to be a Sunderland fan, even though I'd been to Newcastle loads. But the day of the game itself, we were sitting on the couch in my neighbour's room, watching it on colour TV. And the one thing I would say about that, this is more like a golden personal memory, would be it was marvellous to look back on that and to have sat there with me dad watching that game. That was a lovely, lovely memory for me. The game itself, yeah, tension. We were talking about that before. I mean, we scored too early, didn't we? But no, it was. That's where I watched it, in the neighbours, in front of a colour television, for the first time, and it was a fantastic occasion. Even in our street, I mean, obviously, I was brought up in Morpeth. Was where I was here. I'm in Morpeth, in the middle of Northumberland, and there were houses and lampposts in the street that had red and white on them, and I'd managed to get most of the lads my age. It was a council estate, in Morpeth, and most of my mates along the street were quite, they were into sort of let's see if Kelvin's team can win, I got a fair bit of support in the street for that. There were a couple of other Sunderland fans in the street, but that's where I watched it.
I don't think that support would happen these days if you're watching Sunderland playing an FA Cup final in Morpeth.
You'd be surprised. At one point, I don't know if you know this, but it used to, the Morpeth Sunderland supporters branch was one of the biggest supporters branches out with the London branch. I think only in the mid to late 70s, only the London branch was bigger than the Morpeth branch. But we pulled from there's a little place called Pegswood, about 2 miles away, and Ashington. It was miners in the main miners that had moved up to the Northumbrian coalfield that brought their football team with them in the main. That's why there was such a healthy support. We used to run, there would be a bus that would go from Ashington and Morpeth to the games. It wasn't, if you had a little bit of money, it wasn't that hard to get to Roker from Morpeth if you were relying on public transport, especially during this run. I mean, the momentum that built up, and sometimes you couldn't get a seat on the bus.
Yeah,
it was chocker. People were jumping back on board with the team, and that, having been through some really rough seasons. That was the other thing. The context to the season was how difficult. How difficult a few years it had been to watch Sunderland. It was hard work, and then all of a sudden the shackles are off, and we're playing like we've got these two young lads, Hughes and Chewett, who were fantastic to watch in full flow. We've got this colossal athlete, Dave Watson. People call him Big. They often refer to Big Dave. I mean, 6 foot's big, if I'm any judge. But he wasn't massively tall for a centre half. He was just such an athlete. Dave Watson, fantastic athlete, and he came into his own at centre half, and especially in that game, the number of interceptions and headers that he makes, you couldn't have been anything but inspired by him if you were playing beside him. Fantastic player and athlete he was.
Up for the cup in London town, that's where I long to be. I couldn't get a ticket for the game, and to see it on the telly's not the same. All the lads and lasses were leaving at the station. I couldn't get a ticket for the game.